guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be making wedding dress number 2 out of the 4 wedding dresses I'm going to be making in this mini series. And today I am so excited about this dress because we're going to be using a lot of lace and I think it's going to be really pretty. So this wedding dress also shouldn't be too hard. It's going to be more on the beginner side, but it's also going to include full-length sleeves. You excited about the sleeves? Me too, Basil. And I don't think I've ever done sleeves like this on my channel, especially with a dress. So that should be really exciting. And like I mentioned in the last video, I am going to be making patterns for these dresses. So hopefully those will be coming out pretty soon after the videos are. And for the fabric for today's dress, this one here is a charmeuse satin, and this is 6 yards that I got from Fabric Wholesale Direct. And then this one here is 6 yards of this really pretty lace fabric that I got from Joann's. And this fabric makes this one a little bit more on the pricey end point. The last one was very inexpensive, but this lace did cost me like $50. But if you search hard enough, you probably could find some cheaper options for this. I was even thinking about just getting like a pair of curtains. I don't know why I didn't do that in the first place. But like this fabric is going to be the show of this dress. I am so excited about it. So let's go cut it up. So here's all the pattern pieces for this dress, and we're going to start off with the front bodice pieces. So on the left we have the center piece and on the right we have the side piece. And I decided to double up my lace to make it a little bit more opaque, but if you don't want to do that, then you should just half all of the lace in this pattern. And then next up are the back pieces, and again, same deal with the center and side pieces. And then next up is the sleeve piece, and I actually cut this out wrong the first time I did it and I realized later. So that's why it's in a different setting, but we're just going to be cutting 2 of the sleeve pieces out of our lace. And then these are the skirt lining pieces. So this is the front one, and we're just going to be cutting one of these on the fold of our fabric. And then this is the skirt lining back piece, and I'm folding it in half so you can kind of like see that it has this slope shape. So it starts off a little bit smaller towards the side and then gets a little bit longer to have like a little train in the back. And we're going to cut 2 of these pieces. And then here is the skirt overlay pieces, and again this is the front one where we're just cutting one on the fold. And then here is the second one where again it has that same kind of sloping shape, and we're going to be cutting 2 of these. Now it's time to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. And Skillshare is a huge online learning community with thousands of different classes, and a lot of people know them for like artistic classes like drawing, painting, video editing. They also offer a bunch of career-focused classes as well on like freelancing and content creating, which is really cool because I didn't even know that there like were classes for that kind of thing. It's a really valuable resource for people who are starting out and looking to do this as a kind of job, because there's just so much you can learn from, especially from people who've already been doing it, that is super valuable as you're starting out or even going into it more professionally. And one of the classes I've been finding really interesting lately is called Freelancing for Creatives from First Leap to Finances. And this class is taught by Margaret Harrington, and she takes you through all the steps on how she started up her business and all of her tips from like just starting out to budgeting and working with clients. And I think it's just really interesting to learn about like how different people have started their creative careers, because there's so many different paths you can take with it. And so it's a really cool resource to check out. And I also have a deal for you guys. So the first 1,000 people to click the link in my description box will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can check out all of the amazing classes that they offer. Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video, and now it's time to get to work. So to start sewing this bodice, the first thing we're going to have to do is to baste our lace layers to all of our regular fabric pieces. So my fabric has a really shiny side and a more matte side, and for this project I'm going to make the matte side our pretty side. So on that side I'm going to double up my lace like I mentioned to get a little bit more of an opaque look, and then I'm just pinning it in place, and I'm going to put a basting stitch all around the perimeter of this piece. And we're going to do that on half of our lining pieces. And a basting stitch is just the longest stitch length on your machine, so I'm just using my regular straight stitch and turning that length all the way up and then sewing across it very carefully. My lace also had a little bit of stretch to it, so it kind of makes this step a little bit trickier. You just want to go nice and slowly so that it doesn't get stretched out of shape. going to be taking our front centerpiece, and we're going to be sewing one of our front side pieces to it down either of these side seams. And then we're going to be bringing in our back pieces, and we're going to attach the back side one to the side of the front side, and then we're going to be doing the back centerpiece to either of the back side pieces. And you should pin one of these that uses all of the basted lace layers, and then you should do a second one of these with all of the other remaining lining pieces. And then we're going to just stitch them all together. And as per usual, I'm going to be serging all of my seams to keep all of the raw edges from fraying. But if you don't have a serger, you can also use a zigzag stitch on your machine, which will also help with all of the frayed edges. And once that's done, this is what the bodices should be looking like. And now we're actually going to be working on the sleeve pieces. So like I mentioned, I had to recut these pieces. So they look a little bit different in this shot, but these steps are exactly the same. So we're just going to fold it in half and sew down this long seam here. Turning that right side out, and then we're going to take the seam at the bottom of that curve, and we're going to pin that to the side seams of the bodice, making sure that these pieces are pretty side to pretty side. And then we're going to sew it down from one end of the curve to the other, but you want to stop about 1/2 inch away from the end of the bodice. So I'm just kind of showing you that there is a little bit of a gap there. And then I'm just adding a little notch into the sleeve right below where we stopped sewing that seam. And this is just going to give it more mobility for the next couple of steps. And now I'm taking some really thin elastic. You can use thicker elastic if you want to, but mine is 1/8 inch wide. And we're going to now be finishing the top edge of our sleeve. So we're just going to be folding that raw edge in, big enough for our elastic to fit through, and pinning that in place, and then sewing that all across the top edge. And because this lace does not fray, I'm not doubling it up because that would just kind of give it a little bit of a thicker look that I didn't want. But if your fabric does fray, I'd recommend folding it over twice like a regular hem. And once it's sewn, this is what it should look like. And now we're going to take our elastic and cut a piece to fit around that section of our arm. And I'm just tying it to this little tool that I have, but you could also use a safety pin. And then I'm just going to be threading it through that casing we made. And then you can pin it in place and try it on to make sure that it's going to be tight enough to stay on your arm. And then when you know that you're happy with it, we're just going to stitch down the little edges where we threaded our elastic through. And you could also hem the bottom of your sleeve, but again, my fabric doesn't fray and I wanted a more seamless look. And then this video took a little bit of a segue. I should probably be sewing right now, but I'm dyeing my hair instead. It was not pink enough for my liking anymore. And I've been putting off washing my hair for an embarrassing amount of time because I did not want to be blonde. But there was my finished hair. I think it was much better. But now to try on our bodice, this is what it was looking like. I really love the sleeves. This is after I fixed them. They had a little bit more volume at the top. And now it's time to add a little bit of trim to our bodice. So across that top raw edge, I really wanted to add some of this cute little trim. And so I decided I wanted this cute little scalloped edge. So I cut a section to fit in that area. And then the edge I wanted, I folded that one in towards the bodice. And I pinned this lace all across the top of the neckline. And then I basted it down where I wanted the little scalloped edge to show. So when it was flipped up, this is what I wanted showing, so that's why I made sure to sew it. And then we're going to be folding in our little sleeves so they don't get caught, and taking our other bodice and putting it on top of the lace one. and then we're going to be putting them together all across their top edges. And that's why we left that little room where we connected the sleeve, because you don't want to be catching the sleeves in this except around the armhole. And once that's pinned in place, we're just going to carefully sew all the way across that edge. And then when you turn it right sides out, this is what it should be looking like. So you should have this really cute trim at the top, and also the sleeves should be encased around the armhole but then free around the top. And now to just make it lay a little bit flatter, I'm adding some notches around the neckline and armholes, and this is going to help the fabric lay a little bit flatter when we turn it right side out. So I'm just very carefully cutting into the seam but not touching where we actually sewed our straight stitch. And again, this is just giving our fabric some more mobility. And this step is optional. I decided to understitch the top edge of the bodice. So I'm basically just folding the seam on the top towards my lining fabric and stitching that all the way across. And this is just going to help it lay a little bit crisper when I'm wearing it without having to like iron it all the time. And now we're going to finish up the back of the bodice. So I tried it on and measured out where I wanted the back to go to fit me snugly. And now I'm going to be taking some of this button loop trim and cutting a piece to fit into this section. And then you're going to want to fold the loops in towards the bodice and pin that in place on the lace layer. And again, we're going to be basting this down. And honestly, basting this down is just going to show us where we actually need to sew it on the other side, because we're just going to follow those basting stitches. And then we're going to fold the other edge down and pin it in place and then stitch right down those basting stitches. And we're going to pretty much do the same thing on the other side, except we're not going to need any of that button loop trim. So I'm just folding it right over and pinning it in place. And then we can turn this right side out and you should have the cute little button loop trim on one side and just a finished edge on the other. And the only thing left to do on this bodice is we're going to be adding some boning to give it a little bit more structure. And this one is just a sew through boning I got off of Amazon. So I'm measuring it out where I want it to go on all of the back seams. And then I'm cutting a piece that fits into that section but is 1/2 inch short so that we won't sew it when we sew across the waistline. And then I'm rounding out those top edges so it doesn't poke through our fabric. And I'm just top stitching that down to the back side of our lining piece. So, story time. I originally cut out the sleeves and sewed them up and realized I was not happy with the shape of them. So I was like, you know, I'm going home to my parents' place this weekend. They live next to a Joann's. I will just redo the sleeves out of the skirt front like piece, and then I will buy more fabric to do the skirt front piece again. But then when I went to that Joann's this weekend, they did not have the fabric I needed. So I went into crisis mode. We drove all the way to a different Joann's, and I did find the fabric and I was really, really happy. But now I just got back to my place and I realized they are slightly different shades. I am so mad. So now I am panically boiling a pot of water on my stove and we are going to try to dye it with some tea because I don't even have coffee in my house. But I heard that you could dye it with tea and it's not really gonna work because this is a synthetic fabric, but I think it might work enough to kind of like match it because that is white. It's just like a slightly off white. Fingers crossed this works because I might be screwed here. So here is how my regular fabric looks, and then here's the little test piece. And it's definitely taken off some of that harsh white, but it's kind of more of an orangey color than I want. And here's it compared to the lace I'm trying to match. This is more of like a yellowy, this is more of like an orangey, so I don't know what I'm gonna do yet. Okay, I think I did it. I brewed another batch of green tea this time, the exact same way I did the black tea, and I think I got the colors right. So this is the black tea, and then this is the green tea. This almost is perfect to the next one here. So this is the color I'm trying to match. This is the black tea, and this is the green tea. It's like not perfect, but it's really, really close. So I think we're gonna go with it. So then I left my fabric to soak in my tea and then rinsed it out and left that to dry while I worked on the skirt lining pieces. So to start on assembling the skirt lining piece, I took the front lining skirt and opened it up, and then I'm taking our back lining skirts and I'm sewing one on either side seam, matching up that shorter side. And we're just pinning those in place and then sewing all the way down on both sides. And after that's sewn, we're actually going to put the two back pieces together and pin those in place. But this time we're actually going to measure 9 inches down from the waist of the back skirt. And we're going to mark that so we know where we want to start sewing, because we want to leave the back open a little bit so that we can put in a zipper later. So I'm just sewing until I get to that pin marker. And then we're going to sew the lining skirt to the bodice. And these pieces we're actually going to put wrong sides together first. So I matched up their centers so that it would be even on both sides, and then pinned them wrong sides together and sewed all the way across. And then I worked on the skirt overlay pieces, and we're going to assemble it pretty much the same way. So I'm taking the overlay front piece and sewing one of the back pieces to it down either side seam. And then again, lining up the back pieces, marking 9 inches from the waist and sewing that all the way down. And then I added 2 parallel basting stitches all across the top of the lace skirt that we had just sewn. And then we're going to bring the rest of the dress back in, and this time we're going to be pinning these pieces pretty side to pretty side. So I'm pinning again the centers first and then the backs of the skirts together, and then I'm going to have these huge gaps left, so we're going to pull on 2 of the basting stitches on the same side of the fabric, and this is going to gather it up and create really pretty ruffles, and we're going to do that until it fits into that gap. And once it's all gathered, we're just going to evenly space them out and pin them in place, and then we can sew all across that edge. And then I also tried to serge down that edge, but my serger decided to be a bully. Both of my serger needles broke. One of them hit me right in the throat. And yeah, she did break both of her needles at the same time. So I decided to use a zigzag stitch instead because I tried to rethread the serger and now she's being finicky. Then you can go ahead and take out all of those basting stitches and turn the dress right side out. And now the waist seam should be fully enclosed with no raw edges. We do still have to finish up the very back of the dress though, because we still have that opening for where the zipper's gonna go. So I'm just taking an invisible zipper and sewing it down either side. And we're just doing this on the skirt part and stopping when we reach the waistband, because once you get to the bodice, that's when we're going to add the buttons. So I got that in, and then I stitched on all of the buttons, and I just overlapped the backs of the dress and marked the center of all those little button loops to get where these needed to go. And then the last thing was just to add a hem all around the bottom of the lining skirt. And then this dress was totally done. I think this one is definitely my favorite one so far. I'm so in love with how this dress turned out. I just think it is the most stunning and elegant dress, and I am so in love with these sleeves, you guys. And the buttons down the back are just always so gorgeous to me. That just screams wedding. And I feel like this is a really pretty like modern take on the kind of that like vintage look that I feel like has been really popular lately, but it like still has, again, that princess feel that I am of course always going for. If you guys decide to make this dress for your prom or your wedding or whatever special occasion, you can always send me a picture on Instagram. I absolutely love seeing your guys' creations. And I am thinking about selling these wedding dresses, so if that is something that you guys would be interested in, you should definitely let me know in the comments. But there should also be some new patterns coming pretty soon. And other than that, I hope you guys have a good rest of your week and stay tuned for Wedding Dress 3.